Hi, this is Kiefer from dangerouslyhardcore.com, and I'm on location in Seattle. And you can notice I trimmed a goatee as an homage to grunge rock that started here. And today I've got Joel Jamieson, luckily, on my show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, actually, thanks for letting us use your gym to do this.
I don't have the goatee, but
right. Well, yeah, I didn't warn you about that, so sorry.
Bad.
So one thing that's coming out in the near future is the Shockwave Training Protocol 2.0, which we're upgrading, and this is the first announcement that that's on its way. And part of the Shockwave Training Protocol is making sure that you never overtrain. You always train at your peak, but not beyond, so you can continue to progress without having to have deload weeks or without ever burning yourself out and pushing yourself out into overtrained states. And had I met Joel a year or two earlier, it would have made my job a lot easier, because he came up with the BioForce HRV, which I will let him introduce and talk about, because it's a spectacular device.
Yeah, so BioForce HRV is a easy to use system using heart rate variability technology. And most people out there probably aren't familiar with heart rate variability, but it was actually developed back in the 1950s and 60s as part of the Russian space program. So it's been around a long time. And in a nutshell, for people that don't want the scientific explanation, what we see is that there's changes in the pattern of heart, how the heart beats, basically, depending on how much stress and fatigue and all that you're under. So when we see someone's very well rested, we see one particular pattern of their heart rate. When we see that they're under fatigue, they're not recovering from their programs, they're under a lot of stress, we see a different pattern. And that's because the body is trying to regulate itself at all points and times, and that's reflected in the heart because it's such an important organ, obviously. So what BioForce HRV does is looks at that heart rate pattern and looks at the change over time, and can give you a gauge of how much stress you're under and how well recovered you are, so that you're able to push your body to your limits, like you said, without going past those limits, because that's where we see overtraining, that's where we see a lot of injuries, that's where we see things go wrong. And so it just gives you a quick and easy way to measure that and to have a gauge every day of how much training you should do to go to the limit, but not get pushed beyond that.
Right, and we had an interesting conversation a few minutes ago about how my system kind of relies on people being in tune with their body and being able to listen to what it tells them. And you were talking about fighters and the problem that they have, and sometimes, and I think that's a problem coming up with CrossFit athletes as well. And do you want to talk to that about?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of sports where kind of the mental toughness has been a big focus and a big area that people have talked about. Sports like MMA, of course, obviously people train for CrossFit. Special forces type people, really type A people. I think they're just go, 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 go. A lot of those people, I think, have been ingrained to kind of tune their body out. It's almost been, how tough are you? Toughness is almost a measure of how much can you not listen to your body and push through that.
Right.
And so there are times, of course, where that's important and where you want to be able to really push it. But from a daily standpoint, I think a lot of people don't listen to the signals their body is giving them, because we know that the body is designed to not be overtrained, just like the body's designed to not get fat. But people still overeat, right? I mean, if you're full and you still overeat.
Right.
And I think a lot of people know, like, I feel not great today, but they'll still train hard anyways. And that's where, when you chronically do that over time, that's where injuries and overtraining, and honestly, I think that's a big part of why we're seeing, especially in UFC these days, fighting, we're seeing so many injuries. I mean, it's almost impossible now to see a full UFC card where there's no injuries impacting the card. I mean, it's crazy. Yeah. And that's a big part of it. I mean, fighters and people that are just ingrained to train and push themselves don't listen to that signal the body's telling them. And I think especially people who want to lose weight, same thing. Like, oh, I've got to cut my calories even more to lose more weight, or I've got to lift extra weight. It just snowballs. Cycle. Yeah. So it's very important, I think, to have something objective that gives you real hardcore feedback rather than just trying to listen. Because some people do it very well, and then some people won't. Others not so well.
Yeah, and you've got an exciting project you're launching with that. And if you don't want to talk to viewers, that's awesome, because now they'll be wondering what the hell it is that you're going to launch that I'm actually really excited about. So that'll be coming soon for everybody, unless...
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a little preview is what we want to be able to do with the next generation of BioForce is be able to pull data, be able to pull information out from people trained all over the world, because we have so many unanswered questions about what works and what doesn't. And the reality is that the research out there is very constrained, because they have to control for every variable known to man. They generally have to use very small populations of people. They're generally very short-term studies because they cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to do. But what if we could really create a real-world fitness laboratory across the whole world, across different athletes, different abilities, and we could take that information and learn from it. I mean, that's really what the project we're going to talk about. But that's the idea. We want to be able to answer some of these biggest questions. You know, how does carb backloading, how do his diets really stack up compared to other diets maybe, or how does a particular program really stack up in the real world? And I think that's what we want to be able to answer, is those types of questions. What works, what doesn't really work, and in the real world, you know, not in the clinical laboratory setting, which
there's limitations. What you can measure.
Exactly, and most research out there is done in kind of sedentary people because they're the easiest people to recruit.
Right, exactly.
I mean, where are you going to find 10 top-level MMA fighters to participate in a 6-week research study?
Right, it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. But with what we're working on, that's exactly what we're going to be able to do. So I'm excited about it, and I've pulled in literally a guy from MIT who's got his master's in artificial intelligence and some really top-level people to pull something together. So we'll be talking about that more, but it's definitely a cool project that I'm excited about.
No, I'm really excited. The idea of turning the world into a laboratory and answering a lot of questions that you just can't answer any other way is amazingly exciting. And I want to be a part of it, and I'm hoping that the entire DH crowd becomes a part of it and contributes as well. It'll only make things better. And that's what I really care about, is making my programs better, just making the state of science better, essentially, because we're not going to move forward, we're not going to be superhuman without it. So.
Well, it's funny, if you look at the Russians back in the 80s and 90s, or 70s, 80s, a lot of their research wouldn't have met the critical, wouldn't be publishable in peer-reviewed journals by our standards, because they didn't care about controlling everything. They wanted to get the core answer, so they would do this with one athlete population, do this with another, compare the results and make some inferences about that. And they were able to use that to build a very solid program, obviously. There's a lot of things they did that weren't so great, but there was a lot of ways they went about testing and researching that weren't peer reviewable and applicable to what we would consider good science. Right. But their athletes got better, and they learned the information and improved.
They were able to recognize large trends, which is the way that you go about them refining.
Exactly. I mean, I would take a study of 1,000 people with way less controls and of everything being controlled variable-wise. I would take that any day over a very controlled 8-person study. Right. I mean, you just don't get enough information out of that. So, yeah, I mean, that's the idea. We're working on that. We'll have more coming in January.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. All right, everybody. So if you are interested in Joel's work, and you very much should be, because I am, tell us where everybody can find you, Joel.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the main place is just 8weeksout.com. That's really where I post all my articles and videos and have our general discussions. They can also find me at Facebook. Of course, it's Facebook/Joel Jamieson, and Twitter, same thing, just Twitter/Joel Jamieson.
Do you tweet a lot?
I don't tweet a lot, actually. I'm not a big tweeter. I should be. I know a lot of people tweet. But just 8weeksout.com is where they're gonna find everything they need to.
All right, great. Thanks a lot, Joel, for letting me use your gym and getting on the show.
Yeah, well, thanks for growing the goatee out as a homie.